Welcome back. It is a Friday. It's your Business Friday. Ron Nelson, Nelson Commercial Real Estate, and his notes came in this morning at, 8:03 or someplace.
That was more like 9:03, wasn't it?
It was close.
You're giving me the benefit of the doubt that I probably don't deserve.
Well, I was on the wrong time zone. But new national trends for housing and mixed use are infiltrating Sioux Falls. Where are we going?
Well, we always talk about trends, and we're in the middle of the country, the breadbasket or whatever of the country, and you talk about trends on the coasts, and there's good ones and there's not so good ones. And the nice thing about being in the middle of the country is both of them may sometimes never hit us, if they get traction on the coasts. Not that everything originates on the coast, but certainly it seems to.
They would tell us it does.
Yeah, well, they believe it is. But we hear the term mixed use a lot in real estate, and we can talk about that. But I thought before we even talked about it, let's maybe just define what it is, because there's a lot of terms, and certainly people in every industry, kind of bandy about terms, specific to their industry, assuming other people know what they're talking about. And sometimes you see these glazed over look in people's eyes when they don't quite understand what you mean. So let's just expand a little bit on what we mean by mixed use. Certainly we have stores, storefronts, all over the place, offices, office buildings, all over. You throw out the term mixed use. Generally, it means you're adding a housing component. We see multiple categories. And so by mixing uses, the use, we're talking about a category. Retail is a category, meaning stores, things like that. Office is a category, and housing, is a category. You don't see a lot of housing with, say, industrial, so those aren't two categories that you see mixed a lot. But certainly there is just this trend that we as consumers like to have things kind of in close proximity. It's cool to have the automobile and, go wherever we want. But, certainly in the urban and larger markets, you hear of public transportation because
we don't hear that much.
We don't much. No, we don't have light rail here. You hear about that, of course, in the Twin Cities, and, most large metropolitan areas, have light rail. Because, people, in many cases, millennials especially, it seems like the trends are, less favoring cars and things like that. But here's an interesting statistic. 78% of U.S. adults would consider residing in environments that offer housing, workplaces, shopping, dining, and recreation, all within close proximity. And by close proximity, we're kind of talking about within walking distance. We're seeing certainly.
Is that walking distance 12 months out of the year if you're in the Midwest?
It's a relative thing.
But if you're on the coast and you have nice weather, you can walk 12 months out of the year.
Yeah. So, we're seeing, let's use some Sioux Falls examples of mixed use where we're adding that housing component. Certainly we've had Washington Square come into play. Retail on the main level, the newer wine store that's opening, Wine Time, I think it's called, the ice cream shop that's there, and then there's offices on the upper levels, and then housing on top of that. So that is the classic kind of three different types of categories or uses, all within one mixed use environment. But same deal. I talked to tenants at office in Washington Square, and they love it. I talk to residential people that are there; they love it. But it's also kind of an area trend. So talking about our downtown, the cool thing about our downtown is we are seeing projects that appeal to millennials, they appeal to middle agers, and they appeal to seniors. So it is a universal appeal that, again, if you're talking that statistic I quoted earlier, 78% of adults, that's all adults, not a certain age of adults, but want this, so that is this trend that is happening, and we're seeing it again more in Sioux Falls. It's been going on. For years, you said you're going to New Orleans here next week. You're going to St. Louis this week, and you'll see all that stuff, in these bigger metropolitan areas, but they're coming from the coasts to Sioux Falls. They're coming from the metro areas to Sioux Falls, and
we have something to offer. Well, people want to come, and that's what you'll talk in Vegas, too.
Well, sure. So what's the other cool thing that's obviously happening in our town? The Levitt band shell thing going on. And I sat next to Joe Batchelor at Rotary either this week or last week, and we were just talking about that. You know, you have the Cascades project, which is, again, another wonderful example of a great mixed-use project, but none of us really know how yet. You know, we'll find out in about 45 days, I think, how we're going to react as a community to this whole Levitt band shell.
Dream. So that you talked about on this.
Well, yeah, we've got Arc of Dreams
coming in May.
Yeah. Now that's not specifically an entertainment component, but it's still a lifestyle type thing. It's a landmark thing. It's going to create a lot of traffic and things like that. But until this Levitt thing hits, and what is there, 30 some concerts this year, 52,
blows your mind.
50 plus in future years. That's going to change where people may want to live. We've got Sioux Steel coming up virtually adjacent to the Levitt project, and they're going to be looking at a lot of these mixed use things, but it's this trend. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about, we're seeing it, but kind of understand the science or the rationale, the consumer trends behind what's driving that. And even in Sioux Falls with our zoning classification, when we redid Shape Places, what's that getting to be now? 5-6 years ago, something like that. We have a new zoning designation called Live Work, and it's one designation. It's kind of a hybrid of a residential zoning classification, kind of a hybrid of an office zoned classification, but it's its own animal.
Do you see any reason not to do that? Is it popular enough to do?
Well, no, I think the word might be appropriate. It's appropriate in certain areas. In some areas, it's not. There's some office parks, office areas that I'm not saying you wouldn't want to live around there, but I just don't know that the market demands would be that people would want, there's a demand to, live in that area. And so, as the city, they're trying to kind of map out, formulate, and kind of drive, which they do by classifying zoning areas a certain thing. That's kind of driving what's going to be going, on a particular site. And I'll use an example at 85th in Minnesota, where we have the Schulte Subaru that has kind of exceeded all expectations. We were going to develop, we got the Aldi that is at the main entrance there. And we were going to do a bunch of shops and things like that in front with the Aldi as kind of an anchor in the back. Well, it turns out this Subaru operation of Schulte's has been so successful that they ended up growing and growing again and growing again. And so some of the land opportunities that I had to sell is being consumed by Schulte Subaru. But that last strip of land adjacent to the housing is a live work zoning designation. And, you might remember a few years ago with the Walmart controversy and all that, those neighbors were, some people call them the NIMBYs, the not in my backyard folks, but, very legitimate concerns that they voiced that, we don't want all this craziness right next to our house, and so what the city does is makes this kind of buffer zone, if you will, transitioning from, heavier retail. You got the Walmart across the street, but you've got the car lot, and all that.
And you're going to have an exit down there very soon, too.
On 85th Street exit, yeah.
And that makes that property even more valuable. If you're the neighborhood there, you're like, what happened to our neighborhood?
So, yeah. So anyway, just a little discussion about, the mixed use, this zoning designation that we're doing. So we're looking for that as a city. We're driving that. So anyway.
He's Ron Nelson, Nelson Commercial Real Estate. How do they find you?
Simply on the web as an abbreviation for Nelson Commercial. Ncommercial.com is our website. So www.ncommercial.com will find us and ways to get in touch with us.
May is the Vegas trip.
Yeah.
Why is this so important? Why is this almost the New York City for events like this?
Well, I suppose every industry has all sorts of splintered and fractured, kind of factions, if you will. And, you can go to these conventions every week. every month there could be something that is of interest. And, a lot of them are valuable, but, at some point you have to work, too. So this is the one event that is kind of the catch-all for, virtually everybody that touches the industry. I mean, there are storage unit guys there. There are industrial guys there that are kind of serving the fulfillment needs of retailers. So it's largely a retail driven thing. The ICSC is the organization, which is the acronym or letters for International Council of Shopping Centers. And then they've called this event in Vegas Recon, which I don't even know what it stands for. Real estate conference or retail conference. I don't know what it is. But anyway, it is the convergence of shopping center developers across the world, retailers across the world, and all us guys like me in between that are the matchmakers that are trying to put those things together. And, it's very blatant what we're doing there. They just have these sessions called deal-making sessions. We are there to make deals. And so it's been going on long before I got in the real estate business. But, I'm in the mid-20s of how many times I've gone to it, 25-plus conventions here in Vegas. And so, it's a big deal. We'll be talking a lot more about it. And, sometimes you see direct impact to Sioux Falls on what happens at that thing. Always indirect impact, but it's an exciting show, and it's coming up in about a month.
Ron Nelson, again, how they find you?
Nelson Commercial Real Estate, or N Commercial on the web for short.
We'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Bill. Enjoy New Orleans.